it's Joyce Conroy. We are back on Ernie's Corner and the Block Party. Ernie, you always make excellent suggestions, and I'm just blown away. And I think many of our friends on the block are too, with the work that you have done when it comes to not only the corporate work, but also album cover designs. $5 Shoes is the group. And I did a little research, and there was a guy named Greg Diamond that was part of that group that went on to produce a big disco hit.
Yes, yeah, well, like you were saying, more and more and more. I mean, and that was huge. I mean, I thought it was Donna Summers. It was
Yeah.
that big. And still to this day, a very good friend of mine is a DJ in LA, and they still play that song. It's like Alice Cooper's "School's Out." Every summer when school's out, that song becomes a hit again. It's amazing. And yeah, $5 shoes. Joyce, we were going through the list of upcoming shows that we want to do and stuff that we want to talk about. And, and each time we get through with a show, I say, okay, you have the next choice. And then in between then and like midweek, I'm like, well, wait a minute, let's try this one. And this one is a very special cover. And for a lot of reasons. The first reason is that, it was less than normal, direction in music. It was a different kind of music. It was moving in a different direction than music had been going, and it was sort of considered an underground kind of glam rock kind of thing. And $5 Shoes, the members of that group were one of the earliest bands in that whole glam rock and hair band kind of movement in music. And they got sort of, I think because they were both from the same area, I think they got sort of second shelved or back shelved because of the New York Dolls. The New York Dolls were much more controversial than they were. But it was also a time in an industry that was changing. There was so much change going on. The industry was moving out here from the East Coast. The sound was coming from the West Coast. The recording was usually being done in Southern California and San Francisco. And so everything was changing, including in my world, packaging. We talked about this before, board packaging. This cover could have never really been done on a paper mounted to board cover. And we'll get into that in a minute. But the first thing that and the other one of the other main reasons why this cover was so important was because it was really one of the first album covers that Pacific Pioneer did as a company. We had a great run with packages before when we were working for somebody else, but we now were starting over, and we didn't really want to use any of the stuff that came out of before. We wanted it to all be about Pacific Pioneer right now. And $5 Shoes is one of those albums that was one of our first ones that we could say, yes, this is a Pacific Pioneer album. And on top of that, it was nominated for a Grammy. Not so much the music, but the album cover. The album cover was our second Grammy nomination. We were nominated for two that same year, 1972. We were nominated for $5 Shoes, and the other package that my partner Tony and I had both created and worked on and had to walk away from was School's Out, the Alice Cooper package. So both of those were competing in the same year, both being done by myself and my partner Tony, and only being able to get credit for one. And it was really kind of like poetic justice in a way, because Shep Gordon, when he found out that the credit was given to the company that we had worked for before, and I didn't get any credit, he wrote a letter to the Grammys and basically said, hey, you're giving the credit for this to the wrong person. And it was Ernie Cefalu, and then they wrote back and said, basically, he worked for the company he worked for had the right to say who gets the credit for it. And I knew that when we walked away. And you and I had talked about that. I mean, it's hard to walk away from something you created and have somebody else take credit for it. And you're just sitting there. And before the internet, thank God for the internet, because the internet became a more field leveling platform to where you could really, build, the truth it takes a long time. And when I first started getting on the internet, people were calling me a liar and I didn't do this, especially around the Stones thing. And all that now has come full circle. And, and like I said, just to be considered as an honor, for the Stones thing and to be the chicken or the egg didn't really matter. This one was purely us, but it also had roots back behind, they all do. In 1971, Melanie had a hit song called Brand New Key. And that was a big song for her. Her husband, Peter Shakira, produced it, arranged it, did the whole thing. And based on that song, that single, they created Neighborhood Music, Neighborhood Records. And they signed, it was mainly Melanie. And I had met Melanie. Actually, I didn't meet Melanie then. I met Peter where I was working before Pacific Pioneer. And, we did an album and a bunch of in-store point of purchase for Gather Me, which was a big album for her. And so I had met Peter, and Peter was great. We used to do a lot of partying, at Craig Braun and at Pacific Pioneer. But Peter was he was one of those kind of guys, and you and I were talking about that just earlier, about you meet somebody and you just know that person is real, and you know that person, you want to be able to know that person more. And Peter was like that. Peter Shakir was a true creative. He was a business guy. He was an arranger. He was a producer. He was a director. The biggest thing of all, he was a risk taker. He was a real risk taker. And that as that said, he signed a group called $5 Shoes that was in a new genre of music that was really kind of thumper underground New York, kind of Brooklyn, New York kind of music that was really as new to the music industry as punk rock, as grunge, as rock and roll itself, and heavy metal, all these hip hop. This was that kind of thing. And Peter, with a new formed a record company, took a risk. It wasn't Melanie stuff. It could have been Joan Baez and Melanie and Judy Collins and all that easy listening stuff. But Peter was a visionary, and I think that's kind of, and not to flatter myself, but I think in a way, I'm kind of a visionary. I'm kind of a savant visionary, because it's usually what I'm focused on at the moment. What's the most important thing in my, career right now or in my mind. And so I become oblivious to everything else and just focus on that. And Peter was like that. I mean, but he could do it. He was just different. And when, we did the Gather Me album for Melanie and worked with him, and he really liked that. And then we left the company and we started Pacific Pioneer, but we never lost track of him. Okay. He reached out to us, and he had signed this group called $5 Shoes. And he started telling us about glam rock. And I didn't really know what that was. I mean, I had seen the New York Dolls, and what they were about, which was that feminine kind of glam rock kind of, you're not sure if it's a boy or a girl. And actually Alice was early on doing that, because I remember a time when you didn't know whether Alice was a boy or a girl, and they played that big time. I mean, Shep was very smart to play that. And even when you saw him live, they kind of, the way he pranced around, the costumes that he wore, New York Dolls were certainly that. $5 Shoes wasn't really that. They were more of they were like a hard glam rock. They were more rock and rollers who kind of discovered, through the band members coming together from different directions, discovered this music sound that was happening mainly in the East Coast, and really sort of got onto that. And so in 1972, we had started Pacific Pioneer, and Peter was also a friend of Bill Levy. It's so weird, because there's all these tentacles out there, and I'm sure you have the same kind of stories in what you've done with the people the people that you work with, and you go on your different directions. All of a sudden, your lives cross again. And Peter was like that. He came back to us. He was one of the early guys that came back to us and told us about this group. And I think part of it, certainly he loved working with us, and um, but I think more than anything, he was not really sure of what it should look like. And this is another one of those cases where we get a photograph, and we get in this case there was no record title, there was just a name of a group,
Oh, here it comes again.
yeah, yeah, but he signed this group because he was ready for the change. He
Mhm.
was ready. He was, like I said, he was a visionary who got it. He understood that, music's not always going to stay the same. It's going to have these gyrations. It's like a living thing that, that takes from one to the next one and moves in different directions. And it's really great because I was able to experience that in a lot of ways in this industry because such an array of different work. I mean, we talked about it, the Brady Bunch, then you got the Sesame Street, and then you got Black Sabbath, and you got Alice Cooper. There's such a variety of music and artwork that we created for those genres of music that really sort of we didn't realize what we were doing when we were doing it. Okay,
It was very innovative. I mean,
yes. Well,
it is so true.
I guess so, and risk taker too. I mean, when we started Pacific Pioneer, it was taking a risk. Tony had no connections in Los Angeles. He was a fish out of water. I wasn't that familiar with Southern California, even though I grew up in Northern California, and the work that was promised never materialized. So that night on the mescaline trip, we decided that no matter where we go to work and whoever we work for, it's always going to end up the same way. So the only way we could do this is to follow our dream. We
Yes.
put in $2,500 and we started Pacific Pioneer with the help of Ivy Hill. We talked about that in the past. And people like Peter Shakaric and Melanie. Melanie was great. We went on to do the Madrigada album and a Live at Carnegie Hall album. And, her and the lady that she works with reached out to me right as the pandemic was starting. She's putting together a book, and she wanted to know if I would be interested in being interviewed in it and share some of the stuff that we had done for her, because I have a lot of the artwork that we did for her, and absolutely great. And then I didn't, I said, "How's Peter doing?" And she said, "Well, he passed away, and he had passed away a while ago." And they were both so sweet. I did get a chance to meet her, and she was a real person. I mean, she just really loved her music, and loved Peter, and the two of them were just amazing together. So back to this album cover. So I had a name of a group and I had a photo that you'll see in a minute, but I wanted to do something kind of edgy. I wanted to do something that was different than what album covers were looking like. So I came up with this idea. There is a shoe company, a shoe wax company out of Brooklyn, and it's called the Knickerbocker Boot Wax or Shoe Wax Company out of Brooklyn. And they're old. So I got and I collected all these. I went upstate New York when we were living there with some friends, and I bought a bunch of old photo albums and magazines and all this little knick-knack tchotchkes, and one of them was a can of shoe wax. And it was just, it had that look, but yet it needed to have some chutzpah put into it. And so I designed that lettering that you see there, $5 shoes, and came up with this idea of, this boy that was a shoe shine boy shining these shoes. Because like I said, you'll see the picture, and it really isn't an album cover. Again, here we go again. Like you said, yeah, it's a nice photo, but it's not an album cover. So I did the cover itself had rounded corners, so it wasn't square like the normal album. And then the back looked like the metal of the can. And, we picked up that banner that we had created, and all the credits and stuff are on there. And, and when we showed the sketches to Peter, I mean, Peter he was over the moon about it. He was such and he actually made a couple of really good suggestions, for us to do. And it was like, and that was kind of the cool thing about working with Peter, because he was like another artist in the art department. He was open for change. He was open for suggestions. He liked to contribute to what we were doing. And, and even though, I had met him in New York, but when we did this album, he was in New York, I was in Los Angeles. We were on the phone. We were on the phone with a couple of the guys from the band, Mike and Jim, were on the phone with Peter, and they played a couple tracks. And they kind of was telling me about this, glam rock thing. And I was familiar with, the New York Dolls. I didn't know what they called their music. I didn't know it was called glam rock till after the $5 Shoes experience. But it was when I heard the music. I had heard a couple of New York Dolls songs, and when I heard this, it was like I said, it was more like a heavy rock thing than glam rock. But that's how they positioned it. So talking with them, I came up with the idea of the can of shoe wax, and then what you see over here now is the inside. So the album cover opens up. And then and there was, I'm not sure whether there was text in there. I don't think so. Just that logo we created. And then on the right side, we have the can of wax. And everybody, you spit on the wax, and that's how you get it to, be soft. And this is interesting. We hired a young illustrator because at this point, Joe Garnett was there. Bill Garland hadn't come yet. Drew and Joe. And we were swamped. Drew was working on the Joe was working on the Doors album. Drew was working on, I forget which one it was, but I think it was it wasn't Welcome My Nightmare. I think it was Greatest Hits, or no, it wasn't Greatest Hits. It was something else. Maybe it was, anyway, he was busy. All my illustrators were busy, all two of them. And I'm certainly not an illustrator. So there was this young illustrator that kept coming by and showing his portfolio, a guy named Bob Rodriguez, right? And he was really good. So we hired him to do the illustration. And when you see this inside panel on the left or on the right here, on the right, the spit on the wax, he kept making it look like liquid. He kept making it look like if it was water that was spilled on a counter, when it really needed to be spit. And he tried it a couple different times, and he just wasn't getting it. And Bob Rodriguez went on. You can Google him. I mean, he is an amazing illustrator. He's right up there with Drew Struzan. He really is. I mean, he's become an incredible illustrator. Does a lot of corporate stuff, does some music stuff. But we were able to collaborate on this album. That first time I used him, first time he did something for us, first time he did something in the music business, and we get nominated for a Grammy. Well, that's pretty cool.
That is cool. And that is another name that comes forward. Bob Rodriguez.
Yeah. Bob Rodriguez, illustrator. Look it up, man. It'll blow your mind. It's like Joe Patagno with all the, Motorhead stuff. And he worked out with Pacific Pioneer before he went to England. So Joe Garnett put it very, very well. He said, for me, the Pacific Pioneer is Mecca. It attracts people who are, sharing the same kind of dream that you're following. And it was so true, because we had built, by the end of 1972, I had built an art department of 6 people that could have stood toe to toe with any other design firm or ad agency in LA. And we did stand toe to toe through a lot of corporate accounts. Alltech Lansing, Wolfgang Puck, Coca-Cola, taking away work from these major agencies because we could cut to the chase. And we would show them, just like in rock and roll, we would show them what they needed versus what we knew they would buy. And there's a big difference. And I know you know that, okay? Because you're in an industry like me that resonates. I can see by your face that it resonates. So back to this liquid problem. And I tried to explain it to him, and he just wasn't getting it. I said, look, do me a favor. Go to the bathroom. Next time you have to take a pee, go to the bathroom and pee in the water and take a look at how it looks. It's not liquidy. It doesn't look like water spilled on a table with all these pretty reflections. It's bubbly, and that's what spit looks like. So he did it, and he got it. So
he sure did.
He sure did.
After your good coaching.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and so the record slips in as when the album opens up, it goes into a pocket that's behind this panel. So it's a sleeve there. It's like a front and back album cover with a flap that comes over. I did like a Link Ray album like that at one point. And so, it was great working with him because, again, I was really sort of hoping that he would come work with Pacific Pioneer. But, he was already doing a lot of work with a company called Peter Palumbi. They were a pretty creative agency. And, it's hard to lure away talent when you don't have the kind of money that will, and not that Bob was into money. He had a wife and a kid, and kind of like Drew, and needed to work. And corporate America was willing to pay more. You had a choice. We had that choice. I had that choice.
Yeah.
Corporate America will give you lots of money, but the work that you do, if you're totally blessed by God coming down and touching you, that your work would be 100% used in that, whatever that was for, was about as hard as that is. But you get the money. The way we went was, we don't really care about the money. I've never really cared about money. It's just, as long as I have enough money to enjoy my life and not have Bonnie have to want. And believe me, she knows, because she keeps all the books, and she's very meticulous when it comes to that, and always has been. And that's part of the reason why I'm not living in a cardboard box. But and we have that same kind of relationship. And we made the choice of going for the art. And here we are 53 years later. And, the collection that I have, just the original artwork is valued at over $3 million. That's quite a chunk,
You made the right decision. I think when you go from your heart, it's always the right decision. I truly believe that.
You did the same thing. Your story is exactly mine. Right?
Yes, very much so. In my story, I wanted to be able to do things like we do with Ernie's Corner. I wanted people to hear these stories. And unfortunately, in a lot of regular radio, you can't do that.
Yeah. And even regular radio has changed. They don't have disc jockeys anymore. It's all pre-recorded crap. And it's very rare to find some. When I remember being in Oakland in college, and there was a woman disc jockey, which was rare, called Mother. She called herself Mother, and she was Oakland, San Francisco. And it was like Wolfman Jack. Everybody listened to her. She was amazing. And she talked to you like a mother would talk to you about how she loved you. And, this is like 1960s, so, and it was so right on. You just get there, you're partying, and you put Mother on, and she's playing incredible music that nobody would play, but it was music that was relevant right then. And speaking about relevant right then, so this is the sleeve of the record. And on this side, you see the worn away wax. Yeah. And again, it would have been great to do it all in color. But if you notice, when I opened up the album, the panel on the left side was black and white, because it would have to make that color, it would have had to print color on both sides of the board. And that doubled the cost. So this is a brand new band. They were lucky to get an opened up album.
Yeah.
Most of the new bands would get a front and a back in a paper wrap sleeve. So they, Peter really believed in them and wanted to give them something that would be memorable and noticeable and disruptive. And he knew that if he came to us, that was what we would give it. And we did. And it was nominated for a Grammy. Just being nominated, forget about whether you win or not. I've been nominated 3 times, never won once. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Just being able to be in the top 5.
Yes.
That's why, for me, the Rolling Stones, it doesn't matter where somebody says, John Pichet did it, or Ruby Major, or Alan Aldridge. I don't care. I know what I did. I have all the art. I have the entire story. And, believe what you want. Most people that doubt me are the ones that weren't even born then,
Armchair critics.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said armchair critics, and you get a lot of that. You really do.
Yeah, Saturday morning football coaches,
Yes.
That same thing. And, and so over here we have on this side, this is the picture that we were given. And I'm going to send that to you. all the different images like I always do. And so that's where we used the picture of them. And if you look at them, you can't really tell from this shot because it's too small. But if you look at the picture, they look like punk rockers.
They do. They really do.
Yeah,
The hairstyles are a little bit, like kind of way Mark Bolan was wearing his hair, that corkscrew hair that he had,
yeah.
especially,
And
the
the
musician
boots,
here. Yep.
the boots and the pants. I mean, it was because it was all new. I mean, it's so funny because all these musicians, how they like to tout how different they are, but how different are they really? Today, if you don't have an armful of a full sleeve of tattoos and all this makeup and crazy chains and leather and shit, you're not a musician. It's how you're perceived, how it's about how you're presented, but it's also how you're perceived. I think we're going to run. Oh no, we got 9 minutes, 9 minutes. But so I think that has a lot to do with how all of this works. And to me that when you'll see the blow up, and it's really I wouldn't consider it glam rock. I would consider the New York Dolls and a couple other groups that were heavy with the makeup, more glam rock, and these guys were more rock and rollers that found a niche, and their music was really good. I mean, I heard a couple when they were with Peter and they played a couple of cuts and we were on the phone, and it was really good music, and we had been exposed to a lot of up and coming bands because by this time, by the mid '70s, people were coming to us. Shep, Gordon, and Alice were sending us people. People were looking at the album covers and who did them. That's how Burton Cummings came to us. He saw a piece that we did for Alice, fell in love with it. He was at that time he was talking to Shep about management, and so Shep said, "Oh, you got to go see these guys at Pacific Pioneer. Go see Ernie." And then I get the phone call, and he's on the call. We talked about I get so many calls. Mary Travers, she called me up, and I didn't recognize her voice. I mean, Burton, you can recognize his voice. It's very, and I'm all about the singer, not about the musicians and stuff as much. But and I like a good tune, and I like the way it's put together. I have a lot of respect for that. Producers, Bob Ezrin, and people like that. Richard Perry, another one that's just amazing. And when this kind of thing comes along, it's a real and again, having so much respect for Peter and him having a feeling, a vision that this is really going to be something, and it did. It became big for a minute, and that's the problem with fame. That's the problem with success. It's fleeting. It's fleeting. If the more successful you are, the more miserable you become because you got to try and figure out how to keep it. Because my mother used to say, people stay awake all night long just trying to figure out ways to get you away from your money. And it's really true. And it's notorious in the music business because
Yes.
they don't keep track. It's just like you got to hit single. Shep told me once, it was after Under My Wheels and after I think there were he had a couple of hits and he was hot, Alice. And he said it's just like somebody busted open a thing and the money's just pouring in. It's just pouring in. It's pouring in. It's pouring in. But what happens is a lot of musicians don't think that it's going to stop. They think it's just going to keep on pouring in. And then it gets down to, and we had talked about this before, it gets down to who gets the money after the single is not played anymore as much. Where do the royalties go? And it always goes to the songwriter. And good friends Flo and Eddie. I used to think that Happy Together was their song and it was always played and it was like School's Out. It's always played because it's such a great song. And I was talking with Mark one day, Mark Bowman, and he said, no, it's, we didn't write it. It's become our theme song for him and Howard. But every time, it's played, we don't get a dime. It goes to the guy who wrote it, and it's kind of interesting because it doesn't work that way with artwork and stuff. It isn't like I get a royalty. Some people go, oh, you get all this money because they use your, no, we got paid once for it. Luckily, I was smart enough to hang on to a lot of it, and it's valuable. And, we'll be talking about it at some point on Ernie's Corner, but by the beginning of the year, there's some very, very new and exciting stuff going on. Certainly you'll be involved with it and you'll get the exclusive on it. So
Oh, thank you. Boy, you're teasing us, Ernie. We love it.
Okay, and now comes the moment. Songs. I know you found the music, and
I
it's
found the music and I'm doing my research right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it up to you on this one. It's
oh
going to be a good
gosh.
one, I know, because you've made some great choices.
All right, well, I'll give it a shot. Love Song for me was a great song. And the other one would be Rain Train. And I think those two songs kind of put a underline under everything that we've been talking about, today. I mean, they are really good musicians. They were a great looking band. I mean, when you see them, I mean, they have a great look.
Yes, they
It's just
do.
that the New York Dolls became more controversial. They became more promoted. They were around the same time, I think, but I think the Dolls were first, or maybe these guys were first. I don't remember, but it was around that same time. And just look at Alice. Look at how many people tried to copy him, but couldn't. I mean, even Kiss, as big as they were, they're not as big as Alice Cooper. They're just not. And I mean, Alice is filling stadiums, and Kiss, they're pretty much gone. They were kind of a cartoon, you know, joke when they first came out. Although I do like their music and I love the visual, with Gene Simmons spitting the blood and the fire. I mean, it is comic book stuff, So for all those people who are living that comic book and live in that comic book world, Kiss is the perfect group. But and the critics always would really beat them up for their music, but I thought they were pretty good. And Ace and those guys and Paul Stanley, those guys were really good. And they had, again, for me, it's all about the visual. After the voice, it's all about the visual, And Alice still does a great show. I mean, his props and everything. I mean, that's why people ask me, which group out of all the ones that you've done was the best to work with and the easiest, and it was Alice Cooper, hands down. Number one, because the crazier we were, the more they loved it. And second of all, there was so much to work with, so much to work with. The snakes and the guillotines and the electric chairs and the eye makeup. I mean, it's just, and we did a lot of stuff. We went to Revlon with Whiplash. They didn't even want to talk to us. We went to Budweiser trying to, because he only drank Bud. They wouldn't even return his call. So it's sort of a bummer being ahead of your time. And these guys, $5 Shoes, I think was ahead of their time. I think the music just went in a different direction slightly, and the look went totally. I mean, when you look at the New York Dolls on that first cover with the lipstick, I mean, they're girls, they're girl guys or guy girls, whatever you want to say. But they found that niche. And they became bigger than $5 Shoes. And it happens a lot. It's like being in a horse race. You got a great horse, but all of a sudden the one that wins and you come in second or third or 10th. I mean, it's just how you're managed, how you're promoted, And
Yes.
I think that because New York Dolls looked so different, that the promoters, the marketers, the people that are pushing it, they knew that. Just like Alice, Shep knew. He said, I just need to change the messaging. If I can change the message, this group's going to be huge. And guess what? Still huge to this day, 50 years later, 53 years later, or whatever it is.
There are
Anyway,
so many
those two are the
components.
songs. And, this time I'm going to leave it up to you to pick from the list. I promise you I won't throw in another one yet.
Oh, that is so kind of you, Ernie. And you really mentioned Peter Shikarik. I was so blessed to have met him and Melanie in New Jersey. And Peter was a visionary. And it was nice because the night that Melanie performed, Peter, we were lined up to meet her. And Peter was talking to everybody in the line
Yeah.
and came up to me and said, here is a card. Here's my name. If you ever, want to, interview her, talk to her. And it was very sad because he passed away maybe about a week after that.
Really?
Such a loss, such a loss. And I met
Yeah.
Bo Jared, his son, and Melanie's
Yeah.
son.
Yeah.
Just a nice guy, wonderful, and very
And Melanie
talented.
too. Melanie was really sweet. I mean, she didn't have a
Yes.
big ego. She was, like, look at me. Some of them are like that. And she was just really down to earth. She was like her music, and she's very talented. Like I said, they just reached out to me about a year and a half, 2 years ago, right before the pandemic hit. And I'm sure that they're going to be reaching back out to me again because I have all the content they want and they want an interview. So it'll be
That's
great. I'll
great.
keep you posted.
Thank you, Ernie. God bless you.
God bless you too and all our neighbors. Okay. Thank you so much. And we're getting a big response. We got a great John Mayle response. I'm getting a lot of views and I'm just glad that people like Ernie's Corner and they love the block party as I do. I listen to it every week now. I just put it on and I sit here and work. And it's great.
We are a
Put
team.
a big picture of me in the background.
We're a team with everybody on the block. It's beautiful.
That's right. Okay, Joyce, you take care. Love you.